look at that, Mr. Akers. It's not.
But the trees died, the landscaping's died, and
yes, sir.
A lot of them were not replaced and things of that nature. My concern is Route 1 is certainly a main thoroughfare for Caroline County, as well as 95. But when traffic backs up on 95, I can tell you people will get off of 95 at Thornburg or at Ladysmith, and you travel down past Carmel Church, or they get off at Carmel Church or at Dowsville and travel up north as far as they can before they get back on the road. It is a major thoroughfare for Caroline County. My major concern is that it does become an eyesore for that Route 1 corridor. We have been trying to clean up some of those areas that have been eyesores in the past. I think we're being successful in some of those being eliminated. And I am just concerned about creating another eyesore there on the Route 1 corridor. That's just not going to be beneficial. I understand that it is a garage there. It has been for a number of years. And there were some cars parked there that should not have been parked there. And I believe you took care of that area after a period of time. But it's not something that can happen overnight. It's not something that can happen in 15 days if they do not comply with the conditions. It's not something they take care of in 30 days. It takes much longer period of time. By the time, if they don't want to agree and work with you, you go to court and all those things. So I remember the trailers that used to be parked there many years ago. It took us years to get it squared away, and then I believe the county had to go to the expense of having them hauled away and putting a lien against the property. So there are major concerns, I believe, and I just have never supported the storage yard that Mr. Seeley has mentioned a few minutes ago. That was taken off of the main road that you travel. That's set back in a business park that the average traveling public is not going to go to unless they either want to go back to the heating and air conditioning place or either to the garages back there. Those are my concerns, is the fact that I don't know that we have, in fact, I know we do not have the staff in order to monitor, to make sure that the conditions that have been imposed by the Planning Commission are ones that we're going to be able to police and to be able to enforce once we have policed them, to take care of the problem immediately. It's going to take us a long time to take care of the problem. Other questions? Mr. Black?
Yeah, I've got, with the applicant, you mind coming up for a second? I just have a question. One of the suggested conditions, I guess, by the Planning Commission was that applicant requests solid vinyl fencing facing Route 1, tubular steel aluminum fencing permitted by ordinance for the remainder of the lot. Would you be willing to put up vinyl fencing all around? As far as applicant requests solid vinyl fencing, would you be?
Not at the expense of it.
So you would not?
I mean, there's already shrubbery, trees and all around that back section and the side section. I mean, I think Route 1 is where everyone's concerned about, and that will be screened very well. And on top of that, the building and the lot is totally off of Route 1. It's back quite a distance off of Route 1. So okay. It really will not really be seen much from Route 1.
Thank you. Mr. Fincham? It says here on number 6, no more than 2 tractor-trailer type records shall be housed on site when not in service. Is that common? Is that something that we do with all of these businesses, or?
We really don't have that many tow service operations with the large vehicles like that. I believe there may be 2 at the one in Ladysmith, but I'm not aware of anybody else. Well, I take it back. There's one in the southern part of the county that is permitted through the board that has a large tow truck.
Okay. And, I mean, I know there's, what is the maximum I see a lot of numbers here. What is the maximum time a vehicle could be on premise? The absolute maximum time, is it 10 days, 14 days?
14 days, condition number 10.
And a total of maximum of 10 vehicles?
Condition number 9 would limit it to 10 vehicles. That's correct. That's related. It's vehicles brought in and towed to the site, not related to the repair establishment.
Okay. The applicant just told me up here that the sides of the property have enough, sufficient shrubbery and so forth. Is that an accurate statement in your opinion, or?
I think it depends on the type of season, whether you have pines, whether you have hardwoods, underbrush, et cetera, et cetera. We do have a catch-all condition in here that requires supplemental landscaping and buffering based upon the site analysis of the type of vegetation. So if we went out and looked at it, yes, there's a lot of vegetation, but it's all hardwoods. It might not meet the screening and buffering requirements in the wintertime and would require additional landscaping to supplement that.
So if we were to approve this, then you could say, hey, look, there's not enough, and then we need to put more landscaping around here.
If it's necessary to supplement a deficiency, yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
One last question, Mr. Fincham, before you go. The facility that we just described as Bowling Green South, that's basically grandfathered. That was before zoning existed, wasn't it, or close to it?
Yes, sir.
So there is no cleanup possibility the county has with regard to that particular site.
That is correct.
However, this site, because it would be a special exception under zoning, at any point in time where the applicant didn't comply with the I guess conditions, thank you, of the special exception, that we could pull the special exception.
The board can revoke special exception for noncompliance with conditions. Yes, sir.
At any point in time.
Yes, sir.
And also, since it's a special exception, if we were to approve it, we could put a 1-year renewal or review period in. If there are any problems within that 1 year, we could say, yes, we'd have to take it back.
Condition number 14, right. Yes, sir.
But also in a case like this, there are some environmental remediation issues that take effect. If there's
potentially leaking fluids,
right,
for example.
Yeah, he's just towed my car with the bad water pump, and you know, there's water in the antifreeze all over, which is toxic. So we'd have to do something to cure the ground. Okay. All right. I think, Mr. Chairman, if you'll indulge me, I'm trying to make the best decision we can. There are some historical factors that, of course, it's like the jury disregard what they just heard. Whether we want to disregard it or not, I mean, we heard it, so there are some historical issues. But I'm trying to work as much as I can based on the fact that this would be an existing business. It may do more for the county. Can we put this off, or we've had the public hearing, can we put this back on our agenda for the 14th, and let me try to get with Mr. Fincham and maybe Mr. Giles and see if there's a better solution?
Absolutely. We'll make a motion to table until the
14th of
August
August?
14th.
I'll make a motion to table this until August 14th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Thomas, seconded by Mr. Black, that we table special exception 01-2012 Bud's towing to August 14th meeting. Discussion of motion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion is carried.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Giles.
Giles,
I'll be in
we'll,
touch with you.
I will address this again on the 14th of August. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing, an ordinance amending Chapter 92, Sewers, and Chapter 112, Water of the Code of Caroline County to establish a new tiered rate schedule for commercial utility customers based on average monthly usage. Separately classify and provide reduced availability fees for facilities owned by the county or by nonprofit organizations. Change the due date for availability payments and provide for a waiver of late penalties under certain conditions. Shiva?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, your fourth public hearing tonight, as Mr. Akers just said, is to change Chapters 92 of the Sewer and Chapter 112 of the Water Code, specifically to establish a new tiered rate for the commercial utility rates. It would basically create 4 new tiers. A commercial rate would continue to be the same rate that we have now. Under our current commercial, it would become Commercial 1, which is anybody that uses less than 500,000 gallons a month. Commercial 2 would be anybody that uses between 500,000 and 2 million gallons a month. Commercial 3 would be between 2 and 4 million a month. And Commercial 4 would be anybody that uses 4+ million gallons a month. Second one is separately declassified and provide reduced availability fees for facilities owned by the county and nonprofits whose sole purpose is to provide public service. As we've discussed at your last meeting, or actually I guess it was the meeting before, the waiving of availability fees that we have done in the past, this would actually create an ordinance that would then state how much we would charge, and of course the new school that's being built would reap benefits of this immediately. Number 3 is to change the due date for the availability fees when they're paid. Currently, they are due 90 days after the applicant has filed his application, and it's proposed to move it from the time the meter is set and come in line with more of the localities around us, and the builders have asked for this to help them as they're trying to sell these lots, and sometimes they set for quite some time prior to them selling them. And then number 4 is to provide a waiver for late penalties under certain conditions. And based on the discussion at your June 12th meeting, the proposed ordinance has been changed to allow all penalties to be eliminated entirely, provided the understanding that the sewer charges are brought current within 60 months. If they should miss a payment within that 60-month period, the penalties will be put back on, and then the county would go after the full debt owed to them. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions the board may have.
Board have any questions of Mr. Shiva? Okay, thank you, Shiva. We will now declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of or in opposition to the ordinance amending chapters 92 and 112? Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of or in opposition to an ordinance amending chapters 90 or chapter 92 and chapter 112? One last call. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of or in opposition to the ordinance amending chapter 92 and chapter 112? Hearing no comment, the public hearing is declared closed. The board have any questions?
Yeah, I do. With Mr.
Black?
Shiva. Mr. Shiva. I was looking at this. It says all accounts that may be subject to penalties will be eligible for a waiver of the penalties only once in a 24-month period.
That's correct. So if your account has become delinquent now, and it takes you, if you only enter into a 2-year agreement or a year agreement, and then a year later you are delinquent again, you would not qualify for this to be applicable to you again.
So let's say, for example, that I owe $1,000 in penalties, okay, and I make an agreement with you that it has to be paid up in 60 months, correct?
That's correct. Maximum is 60 months.
Maximum
it could be anything
60
less
months.
than that.
So I'm making my payments all along, and I miss one payment, everything comes back.
That's correct.
And after 2 years, I can enter into another agreement with you?
That's correct, but we would move forward with trying to collect that debt.
So basically restart again after 2 years, so I could skip a payment every 2 years, right, and then re-enter into agreement?
Yes, sir.
And the fees would be waived?
Not the original fees. If you went through that period and we put all that back on and you still owed that $1,000, we would then go after putting liens on the property. We would go after state income tax returns and the other methods that we have available. Of course, our last effort would be to foreclose on the property.
So if I owe $1,000 and I miss one payment in the agreement, it still goes back to the penalty?
That's
But it can
correct.
be waived every 2 years?
Yes. I mean, if you've paid up, that original amount could not be. Once you've entered an agreement on that original amount, it would have to be paid in full, or we would go after other means of doing that. So if you have not stuck with your agreement and you have not made that payment, you wouldn't necessarily have that ability to come back if that debt had not been paid.
Okay. And then the second question I have for you, when you're trying to collect fees from someone, what's the most effective way that you have of collecting, you know,
Outstanding debt?
Yeah.
Being able to disconnect service.
Well, this, yeah.
Unfortunately, with the sewer system, it runs into health implications, and if I were to do that, then we would have to send the building official down there and evict them from their home not having a suitable
Right, that's really
sewer
not
service.
That's really not an option. Yeah.
No, I mean, that's what I do in
Okay.
our normal county system. That's the most effective thing I've got.
Because I see a bunch of stuff here, like claim against state income tax, obtaining judgment against delinquent accounts, garnishment of wages. So there's none of those are most effective. I'm just kind of curious.
If there's state income tax that's being returned, that is very simple to do. The treasurer, we've received quite a bit of funds this past year from that, of being able to have that out there. You know, once we start the proceedings of starting to put a lien on a property, we think that that'll help. Some of those procedures we've just been able to do here recently when the board adopted the last Dawn Phase 2 and we made some amendments, allowed us to do some additional things that we weren't allowed to do. So it's given us those extra tools in our toolbox that we've never had before to collect this debt.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes. Mr. Shebel, I'm looking at the larger meter sizes, and I think we kind of touched on this a little bit before. I guess I need a little clarity on how this is going to be different. I know there have been times when some of the larger customers have come to the county and they've tried to locate in the county, and we've used the ability to not collect fees or waive fees in order to get a particular business or a particular customer into the county. How does that change with what we're doing now?
Actually, it doesn't change because state law basically says that the utility department cannot refund anything towards economic development. Basically, the county offers that up. The general fund then pays the utilities for that. That's what's supposed to happen. So legally, that fee can never be waived. It never could and still cannot. That's recently been brought to the board's attention, and we know that that practice can't continue and that the general fund would make up any concessions that would be given to a new business.
Okay, so we would actually have to find the money in the general fund, pay the fee ourselves in order to
That's correct.
To give that perk to
That's correct.
A business. Okay, that's all I have right now.
Okay.
Seeley?
I guess I'm going to go back to rates for a second. And I guess my concern is basically the wastewater. We have had people that have never paid a bill, correct?
In the Dawn, yes, sir. There's, I believe, 2 of the customers down there.
And so even forgiving the penalties and interest, if they don't pay, there's just nothing we can do about it.
We can put liens on the property, which again, we've just adopted that where we can do that now.
Right.
If they've got taxes coming back, we can do that. We can go to move forward with evicting them or condemning the property if the board wishes to move in that direction. That would require board action to be able to do that. And then you've still got garnishment of wages, which isn't part of the ordinance. It's still something that we have. And if the board chose to do that,
Have
we
we
could do that
always
as well.
had that?
That was new when we adopted the Dawn Phase 2 portion.
I guess that's my concern, is that 2 years no pay, and then I guess there's nothing we can do about it. It just bothered me when I saw all those late and interest payments. I mean, you can keep adding those and adding those and adding those, and it doesn't influence anybody to pay.
Right, and the biggest thing that we had is the only thing we could have done was filed against their income tax to receive any money. And that's something that this is the first year we've been able to do that. This past year was the first year we were able to do that and did receive some benefits from that. So other than threatening to cut off your sewer, which technically we couldn't do, we were blowing a lot of hot air, and people realized that, hey, they're not going to do anything anyhow. So now I think we've got the tools in our toolbox for us to be able to sit down with each of the individuals. We've talked with quite a few of them, work out pay agrees with them, have them sign the pay agrees, and then have them stick to them. And if they don't, we now have procedures that we can follow to be able to go after and try to collect that money.
Other than Dawn, do we have these problems in the water side, or are we just cutting water off?
So you're 60 days behind. We've got a cutoff list that goes out. We send a notice that you need to pay your bill by X amount of days, and if it's not, we go and cut meters off. We cut 22 of them off last week for non-payment, 60 days delinquent.
So it really doesn't affect the water side nearly as badly.
Yeah, it really, this really applies to the Dawn system. Very rarely will it ever affect any of our other customers, because we get to 60 days, and at that point, we're cutting service, and then at that point, you don't have water and sewer.
Okay, thank you.
Just one quick one, Mr. Shebel. I wanted to make sure I understood what you were saying during your presentation. You were referencing the size of meters, and you said that'll have an effect when we build a new school?
Yeah, the new school is being built behind us now. When they come to actually pay their availability fee is under the new reduced fee.
Okay, and that's kind of what I thought you said, but really, we're going to give them money and they're going to give it back to us, so.
Technically.
Okay.
I mean, it's coming from the general fund, coming to the utility fund, so
Right.
they're two separate funds, but.
And you're right about that accounting part. We need to make sure we do that a lot more so it doesn't look like the utility fund is running a deficit when it's really the general fund who gave things away. So, okay, thank you. That was it.
Okay, all right. I don't have any questions. Thank you. We've talked about this before.
We did? I'm crazy.
Board have any questions? Is there a motion to approve the ordinance amendment?
I so move.
The second?
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Taylor, seconded by Mr. Thomas, that we approve the ordinance amendments as suggested by staff and the changes that staff has made. Is there discussion on the motion? All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. And the motion is carried. Number 8, proposed amendment of Code of Caroline County to create Chapter 100 Service Districts, establishment of Caroline Pines Service District. Mr. Shebel?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, your fifth public hearing tonight is to create Chapter 100 Service Districts and to hereby establish the Caroline Pines Service District, which shall be composed of the Caroline Pines subdivision, which is generally located south of Route 652, Ruther Glen Road, to approximately the convergence of the electric transmission line, then generally south to the North Anna River, then generally northwest along the North Anna River, then generally north along the extreme boundaries of the subdivision on Route 652, then generally east of the electric transmission to include the tax maps that were advertised. In here, what this will do will be allow the board to have the power to levy and collect a special tax. Second thing that it'll do is to allow the district to be able to fund financial capital improvements. And then it'll also allow the facility that are being proposed be managed by the utility department and owned by the department, as well as the district fees and service fees are intended to primarily benefit the landowners within that district. When the board had previously looked at this and we had approved the project and we had a study that was performed and we actually had an analysis that was performed, it showed that we would have about $4 million at the end of 30 years based on the current model information that was provided at that time. Since that time, and staff looking at that, we've invested a lot of time into that model, trying to look at that, and we've got a new set of eyes on that. And with that, we found some fallacies with it. Some of the problems that we had and we felt were dramatically different that changed were the projected O&M costs that were in that model. The original model showed an O&M of $12,375 a year. That included the new line only, did not include any of the lines within Caroline Pines. So that was off drastically. The estimated expense, annual expense we've got is $84,000. That alone, discrepancy is about $2.3 million difference in that model. Another issue that we saw was the projected new residential connections. And during this economic time compared to when the model was done, it showed that 111 new residential connections would be built during that period. Staff has looked at that, looked at the lots that are currently in there, lots that can be built on, lots that cannot, and have projected that we might see 57 of those connected. That equals to about $760,000 difference in the model. The annual increase in monthly user charges, the original model showed a 4% increase every single year for 30 years to the customer. And that's just not realistic. In 30 years, you've got a water bill alone over $100. We've reduced that to a 2%. That would equal to a $1.9 million reduction in over 30 years. So really what we're looking at is the difference in the models are showing us now that we're going to have a $5 million deficit over a 30-year period compared to a $4.1 million reserve. So when we're looking at that, and let me rephrase what I just said, not a $5 million deficit. The difference of that's about $900,000 deficit. I'm showing $5 million that we will not have compared to the 4.1. So we're right at round numbers about $1 million short. Really, when looking at the financial plan and following that, again, it's just a plan for us to look at. We don't know what those numbers are going to be until we get in there and start operating the system. We realize, how many breaks we're actually going to have to deal with on an annual basis. One of the recommendations that we've done is each of the residents in there are required to pay a $2,800 availability fee over 5 years. So that means they're going to be paying their normal water bill and an additional $46.67 each year. So their water bill is going to start about $70 and run. It's going to go up just a little bit, about 80 cents a year over that 5-year period based on a 2% increase. After that, the availability fee goes away. We're showing through the first 7 years that the system will operate on its own because of the availability fees we've collected over that time. And then actually through 12 years, we're fine. Really where we see the issue is trying to replace and maintain the existing lines is where the issue really is going to come in. So looking at this, we feel that it's beneficial for the board to establish a service district today prior to us taking over the system so that everybody understands up front what they're getting into. We felt that if the board came back 5 years from now, that people would say, well, why do we need this? We haven't had that, and we would have a harder time trying to get this passed. Once this is passed, the board would then set an annual tax rate, just like you do on any other rates each year. Right now, we're projecting we wouldn't want the board to do anything at least for the first 5 years, and then after that, if it was necessary, could be used. But there would not be anything there because we're collecting that additional revenues from the availability fee that will basically be being banked to help cover those leaner times. So with that, it is staff's recommendation to proceed with establishing the service district, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Questions of Mr. Shebel? Okay, Mr. Shebel, doesn't seem to be any questions from the board at this point. We will now declare the public hearing open for the proposed amendment of Code of Caroline County to create Chapter 100 Service Districts, establishment of a Caroline Pines Service District. Anyone wishing to speak, please come forward and state your name and your voting district.
Good evening, gentlemen. John Bowers, Reedy Church, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As you probably know, probably remember, I'm the Vice President of the Caroline Pines Property Owners Association, and I've been here several times, and we discussed this project at its very inception. And not surprisingly, well, first of all, I want to thank the board for approving the project in the first place. We think it's a win-win situation. Certainly it's a win for Caroline Pines because we get county water that's professionally provided with 24-hour service availability, and we've had a well problem, and we think that well problems can be solved because we're hooked up to the county system. Back when we were talking about this project initially, there wasn't talk about making us a special tax district. That came up later on. really towards the end, and I don't even know if it came up before the final vote or not. But I want to address what I think are some fallacies in putting a tax district into place right now. What's fair is fair, and if it turns out that our water lines require massive repair, then we've never asked for any giveaways from the county. We've agreed, everyone's agreed. We had 90-some% approval within Caroline Pines for the project, understanding that they'd pay $2,800 per person plus the actual county water bill for the water that they use. We're talking about right now putting in place potentially a tax district that doesn't start taxing for 5 years. And it's based upon a lot of what Mr. Schiebel has referred to as modeling. Well, the modeling basically is working on the premise. He was in the numbers he showed me earlier was $250,000, I think, every 5 years for replacement water lines. Maybe that'll need to be done. Maybe it won't need to be done. Maybe it'll be more. Maybe it'll be a whole lot less. We don't need, the county doesn't need to put a tax district into place now based upon models. As you probably know, we're not hooked up yet because of the issues with CSX and the final connection. All the rest of the route has been completed. As a matter of fact, if you drive down there now, it's all overgrown. I mean, it's you can't tell any construction work was done down Ruther Glen Road from Carmel Church down to Caroline Pines. So we're waiting on that last connection. I'm not saying we don't need a tax district ultimately, but I'm saying we don't need to do one now because by what Mr. Schiebel said, he wouldn't start collecting any money for 5 years. And that's 5 years, I presume, from the time we're actually hooked up and everyone's paying their fees. And it's based upon a model. A model is a fancy word for a projection. You could call it speculation. It's based upon beliefs or assumptions. What I'm asking you to do is set this down for 2 years after we've been hooked up. At that point, you'll still have 3 years before you need to collect any money. Because over the first 5 years, everyone, first of all, we've got 350 homes, everybody's going to pay their water bill, and they're all going to pay that $46.67. That comes out to about $1.1 million that we're paying more or less up front on a project that is, I believe, being paid back over a 20-year period. So what I'm asking you is not to say no tax district. What I'm asking you to say, not now. We've got plenty of time to gather information. What we've got now are models. Models are just that. They're speculation, they're assumptions, they're projections, but they're not real-world numbers. And I think all of us in our own personal lives wants to work on real numbers, not what someone thinks things are going to be like 5 years from now. Fair is fair. And if 2 years after we hook up, it turns out that our water lines need that $250,000 every 5 years, I'll come back here and say, let's do it. But if it turns out that that much is not needed, or it's some amount in between, then I'd like to see the board not now. I would like to see the board now not set up a tax district. I've even seen some monthly projections of how much it would be at the end of the 5 years, and I really think that's unfair. Those of us that came before the board and we talked about it, and I went back and found the projections from WW and Associates back in December of 2009, and at that point, even with very conservative projections about future growth, it seemed like it was going to be a positive for the project. Just one last thing. Mr. Schiebel was talking about the projected growth within Caroline Pines. One thing that I think he omitted, and I may be wrong here, but the county's getting from this a 12-inch water line for about 2 miles and plus. There will be other connections along Ruther Glen Road. How many? Nobody knows. That's 5 years down the road. There can be a lot of houses. We've taken a very aggressive approach. We've sold, over my objections, we sold a bunch of lots for $1,000 lately to get people to build in Caroline Pines.
Gotcha.
So I don't think our projections are unreasonable.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. Appreciate your
And I
comments.
apologize for being long-winded.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
gentlemen.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board on this issue? In favor of or in opposition to? Is there anyone else who would like to address the board on this issue in favor of or in opposition to? Hearing no further comments, public hearing is declared closed. The board have any questions of Mr. Shebel? Mr. Black?
Yeah, Mr. Shebel, I got a couple questions on this. Is the goal of the project to replace all of the pipes inside Caroline Pines? The $250,000 every, 4 years, 5 years? Is that what you're going to do every 4 or 5 years, replace more pipe? Or are you waiting for something bad to happen to their pipes?
No, we're just trying to project on that. We won't know exactly what those costs are going to be till we get in there and start looking at the lines and looking at water modeling in there. We know that there's all kinds of pipe in there. It started in the 1960s, so you're looking at pipe that's 40-plus years old. A lot of the pipe that was in there, you got some Schedule 40, some Schedule 80. They're glued-fitting pipes. You have a lot of issues with those as the weather in the ground freezes and thaws. Even though we're below that, there's still a lot of shrinkage and swelling that goes along with those lines. So you have a lot of problems with those couplings. Some of it's got irrigation piping in there that's not even AWWA approved. We understand there's some electrical conduit in there running water line through it. So we know there's some issues that need to be addressed in there. The problem is you're at a life expectancy of that kind of pipe. You've already exceeded that. So we know as we move forward that there's going to be an expense that the county's going to have to bear, the utility department's going to have to bear to start replacing those lines. So what we did is we've looked at doing that. That'll replace about 60% of the lines with the money that we've shown over 30 years. So now you're talking at the end of 40 years now, you're talking you're going to be 70 years out with those lines, and you've only replaced 60-some% of those lines. So you're going to have lines in there that are going to be in excess of 70 years old at the end of that 30 years that haven't been replaced or may need to be replaced. Now, we're not going to go in there and just replace lines just because we feel that it needs to be replaced now just because it's old line. I mean, you're going to look at history and see the service and how that happens. So the 250 was a projection to say, here's a little bit of money to put towards it each year so that we can start looking at replacing the older, antiquated lines that are in there.
Just out of curiosity, what's $250,000? How much pipe does that get you?
You can lay water main for about $38 a foot. So the other issue that you've got throughout the subdivision is you've got one set of fire hydrants that are in there now on the main stretch. So as you start upgrading those lines, you'll put larger lines in to be able to provide fire flow throughout the neighborhood. So that'll be looked at. Flushing hydrants need to be installed throughout the neighborhood. And then some of the road bores that are in there aren't in conduit, and there's been some issues with some of those. So we've definitely got replacement things that we're going to have to look at.
So they will be getting fire hydrants in there then?
Eventually. We've got with the original 12-inch main that goes in there, from their front entrance to the clubhouse, we've installed fire hydrants on there. Their current lines are not size sufficient enough to be able to handle fire hydrants.
Okay. And as far as the availability fee, if I'm moving into Ladysmith Village today, I'm building a house, what's the water availability fee in Ladysmith Village?
$8,000.
And how much did we charge Caroline Pines?
$2,800.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Taylor, you have questions?
Yes, I do. Mr. Shebel, we're talking about a tax district in 5 years. Is that right?
No, so we're talking about creating the district tonight, or
Right.
is when the board approves it, and then we would not recommend an assessment till further down. There's a kind of two thoughts in that. One is maybe you start assessing something now, something small, so that at least the people realize that it's there. The other thought is to wait till after they're already going to be hit with paying their normal payment, along with the availability fee over that 60-month period. Most people, when they're building a new house, they're able to finance that money into their house, and you just pay that as part of your normal mortgage payment and can finance that over the term of the loan on your house. This here, you're requiring them to pay that up front, and we've allowed them 60 months at interest-free. That's $46.67 on top of their regular monthly bill. If you use 5,000 gallons a month, your average bill over that 5 years is going to be $70 for a water bill. So what we're thinking is you're collecting enough availability fees to be able to cover any repairs that might be necessary. Even under emergencies, you start having all kinds of issues down there. We've collected enough money in that 5 years to be able to cover anything. And then that gives us time to operate the system, understand the issues that we have, come up with an actual replacement program based on our operational history. Then we can start laying out those numbers and say, here's what we're projecting under our actual usage and actual modeling of what we've got, and be able to say we need X amount of dollars to be able to start replacing. And then the board could look at assessing a tax at that point to start collecting the money and start paying for those improvements.
What if we waited for the 5 years to do that?
You could do that as well. One of the things that we thought it was prudent to do that now and creating a service district so that it was part of creating the district along with them receiving water. You know, they came to us saying we don't have water, we need water. And I think in 5 years, you're going to have new faces and new people and new opinions. And if you put it in place now, it's done, we don't have to worry about it. Instead of 5 years from now, you got a line of people out here saying, I don't want this, you're not going to charge me extra money. Tonight, it could be done, we've got the district, and if it's necessary, it's already in place. So it's up to the board, it's strictly your decision.
Okay, that's all I have right now.
Celia, you have questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes, I do, as a matter of fact. Mr. Schiebel, I'm a private citizen. I live on Milford Street. My well goes bad. I come to the county and I say, my well has gone bad. Can you help me? What would you tell me?
Contact the town of Bowling Green?
I'm outside the town of Bowling Green.
You are. You would have to contact the health department and hire a well driller to come drill a well.
And that's exactly what I had to do. I spent $10,000 10 years ago, probably still paying for it, to build a well as a private citizen when my well failed. Now, what the Board of Supervisors did in this particular project, when a bunch of private citizens came to us, instead of telling them what you just said, what we said is we're compassionate. Even though there's no economical benefit in the county for it, because it's not like it's Carmel Church where there's a lot of businesses there where we get tax revenue and jobs, the county said we'll be compassionate and do this for you because we understand there's a problem. At that particular time, I was the chairman of the Board of Supervisors, and I specifically told the president and the vice president of Caroline Pines that we would have to protect the rest of the county by being compassionate. In other words, when we flip the switch and all the pipes in there break, somebody's got to pay for that. That's not going to be the citizens of the county. I'm ready to make a motion to do this right now if we are, Mr. Chairman.
Let me ask a question, Mr. Thomas, before we go through that process. I guess my question is, I have no problem. I think the service districts are something that we want to go with probably in the future. And so the establishment of a service district certainly is appropriate. And I'm thinking that the service district in Caroline Pines is appropriate. I guess my question has to deal with, why are we talking about postponing a tax?
Right.
I would think they would rather start paying now $3 a month, $2 a month, whatever it is that was required on the $70 bill, and that's a total, including the payment for the $46 or $46.67 or whatever that number is for the availability fee, plus the usage rate. That's a total of $70. So I would think that most people in Caroline Pines would rather pay $2, $3 a month, or whatever the number is they would come up with, rather than having to pay $15 a month in 5 years from now, or maybe in less time than that. I just had rather, and another question I have is, can that money be used to help offset any increases in their monthly bill, for instance? If we look at the cost of providing water to Caroline Pines, can that monies that has been collected for the tax district, can that be used to offset any cost other than capital cost? It is strictly capital.
They're going to have to pay the same. They're part of the county system. They pay the same user rates.
I understand that, but we talk about a service district adding another percentage or another dollar amount to that.
But it's not to
pay their user rates, they still have the
Okay.
same rate per gallon
Okay,
of
all
water.
right. Okay.
But now,
The tax
on-
district
on
would
that-
be on their property bill.
Right.
So it wouldn't be on their water bill. So
but on
it
that
would be-
same note, if we waited 5 years and the pipes broke now, they'd have no water for 5 years until we collected all that money to repair
Well,
pipes.
that or they'd have to pay a tremendous amount of money. I just don't understand the thought process of not starting the tax